They insulted the black soldier until he unzipped his jacket. Rain was coming down hard that Tuesday morning in downtown Philadelphia. The kind of rain that soaks through your jacket in seconds and makes you want to run for cover. Marcus Hayes stood at the bus stop on Market Street, watching the water stream down his face. He didn't bother wiping it away anymore. His old military jacket, worn and faded green, was doing its best to keep him warm, but the cold had already seeped into his bones. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes, waiting for the number 42 bus that would take him to the Veterans Affairs office across town. His appointment was at 9. It was already 8:30. Marcus shifted his weight from one leg to the other, feeling the old injury in his right knee acting up again. That knee had taken shrapnel in Kandahar 7 years ago. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and stared down at his boots. They were military issue, scuffed and worn, but they'd carried him through 3 tours. They'd carry him a little further. Across the street, he could see people rushing into a coffee shop, shaking off their umbrellas, laughing about the weather. Normal people. People with normal lives. Marcus used to be one of them, before the army, before Afghanistan, before everything changed. Now he was just trying to make it through the day. The bus was late, again. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. He thought about his daughter, Zoe, 8 years old. Bright smile. She was staying with his mother while he tried to get his life back together. Get the benefits he was owed. Find a steady job. Be the father she deserved. That's all he wanted. Just a chance. Just a fair shot. But lately, it felt like the world wasn't interested in giving him either. That's when Marcus heard the voices behind him. 3 of them. Young guys. Maybe early 20s. Huddled under the bus shelter. They were talking loud, the way people do when they want others to hear them. Marcus didn't turn around. He'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the best thing you can do is mind your own business. But their words started cutting through the sound of the rain. Look at this guy, one of them said, his voice dripping with mockery. Standing out there in the rain like he's got nowhere to go. Another one laughed. Probably homeless. Look at that jacket. Looks like he pulled it out of a dumpster. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He kept his eyes forward. Don't engage. Just let it go. But they didn't stop. Hey man, the first voice called out, louder now. You need some change. We can spare $1 if you promise not to spend it on booze. The others erupted in laughter. Mean laughter. The kind that's meant to hurt. Marcus slowly turned around. The 3 young men were all white, dressed in expensive athletic gear, their sneakers probably worth more than Marcus had in his bank account. They looked at him like he was nothing, like he was invisible, or worse, like he was something to laugh at. I'm just waiting for the bus, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger rising in his chest. Same as you. One of them, a tall guy with a backward cap, stepped forward. Nah man, we're not the same. We got jobs. We got futures. What do you got? A raggedy jacket and an attitude. Marcus felt his hands ball into fists. He'd been trained to fight, trained to respond to threats, but he'd also been trained to control himself, to be better, to be disciplined. You don't know anything about me, Marcus said, his voice low. The guy in the cap smirked. I know enough. I know your kind. Always looking for a handout. Always playing the victim. Those words hit Marcus harder than any punch could have. Your kind. He'd heard those words before. Heard them whispered. Heard them shouted. Heard them hidden behind fake smiles and polite conversation. But standing there in the rain, exhausted and hurting, trying to just get to an appointment that might help him keep his life from falling apart completely, those words felt like they might break him. The other passengers at the bus stop had gone quiet. Some were pretending not to notice. Others were watching with uncomfortable expressions. But nobody said anything. Nobody stepped in. It was always like this. Marcus was used to it. But that didn't make it hurt any less. Listen, Marcus said, trying one more time to de-escalate. I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to catch my bus. The guy in the cap laughed again. Your bus? Man, you probably can't even afford the fare. His friends joined in. their laughter echoing off the shelter walls. One of them pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is going to be great for my story," he said. "Look at this guy, all tough in his little costume jacket." That word, costume. Marcus felt something shift inside him. He'd spent 3 years of his life in that uniform, 3 years watching his brothers die, 3 years doing things he'd never forget and couldn't talk about, 3 years serving a country that promised to take care of him when he got back. And this kid, this privileged kid who'd probably never sacrificed anything in his life, was calling it a costume. Marcus reached for the zipper of his jacket. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold anymore. "You think this is a costume?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The rain seemed to get quieter. Or, it was just that everyone at the bus stop was suddenly paying attention. Marcus slowly unzipped his jacket, and the world seemed to stop moving. Underneath the worn green exterior was his dress uniform shirt, the one he'd kept pressed and ready, the one he wore to VA appointments because it reminded him of who he was, who he'd been. Across his chest were ribbons, rows and rows of them, the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Combat Infantry Badge, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Army Commendation Medal with V device for valor. More decorations than most soldiers earn in a lifetime. Each one represented a moment, a battle, a loss, a brother who didn't make it home. The guy in the cap stopped smiling. His friends went silent. The person recording lowered their phone. Marcus stood there, rain streaming down his face, his uniform visible for everyone to see. "This isn't a costume," Marcus said, his voice steady now, filled with a quiet power. "I wore this uniform for 3 tours in Afghanistan. I wore it when my unit was ambushed outside Kabul. I wore it when I pulled my commanding officer out of a burning vehicle. I wore it when I held my best friend while he died, telling him he was going home even though we both knew he wasn't." The silence was complete now. Even the traffic seemed distant. "I wore this uniform when I lost a fingers on my left hand defusing an IED that would have killed a dozen Afghan children." Marcus continued, holding up his hand where his ring and pinky fingers ended at the second knuckle. "I wore it when I took shrapnel in my knee and kept fighting because my brothers needed me. I wore it because I believed in something bigger than myself." Tears were mixing with the rain on his face now. But Marcus didn't care. "So no, this isn't a costume. This is who I am. This is what I gave. And I don't need to explain myself to anyone. Especially not to people who've never sacrificed a single damn thing." The guy in the cap looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. His face had gone pale, and he took a step back. "Man, I didn't know," he stammered. "You're right," Marcus said, his voice softer but no less powerful. "You didn't know, but you assumed. You saw me standing here in old clothes, and you assumed I was worthless. You assumed I was nothing. You assumed I was beneath you." An older woman at the bus stop stepped forward. She had tears in her eyes. "Thank you for your service," she said quietly. Marcus nodded at her, a tight smile on his lips. Others started murmuring their agreement. A middle-aged man in a business suit came over and shook Marcus's hand. "My son served," he said. "I know a little bit about what you've been through. I'm sorry for how you were treated." But Marcus's eyes were still on the 3 young men. The one with the phone had put it away, looking ashamed. The other friend was staring at his shoes, and the guy in the cap was struggling to find words. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I really am. That was wrong. I was wrong." Marcus studied him for a long moment. He could see the genuine regret there, the embarrassment, the realization of how badly he'd messed up. Part of Marcus wanted to stay angry, wanted to let this guy feel the full weight of what he'd done. But another part of him, the part that had learned about leadership and brotherhood in the service, knew that moments like this were opportunities. Opportunities to teach, to transform, to make something good come from something bad. "You know what the hardest part is?" Marcus asked, his voice gentle now. "It's not the injuries. It's not the nightmares. It's not even the memories of friends I lost. The hardest part is coming home to the country you fought for and being treated like you don't belong, like you don't matter, like your sacrifice means nothing." Marcus zipped his jacket back up, covering the uniform, covering the medals, covering the proof of who he was and what he'd done. But something had changed, not just in the people watching, but in Marcus himself. He'd been carrying around shame. Shame about struggling, shame about needing help, shame about not having everything together. But standing there, having spoken his truth, he felt some of that shame lifting. "I'm going to a VA appointment this morning," Marcus said, addressing not just the three guys, but everyone at the bus stop. "I'm trying to get help for PTSD. I'm trying to get the benefits I was promised when I enlisted. I'm trying to get my life back on track and be there for my daughter the way she deserves." He looked directly at the guy in the cap. "You called me a beggar. You said I was looking for a handout. But I'm not asking for anything I didn't earn. I'm asking for what I was promised, what every soldier is promised, and I shouldn't have to prove I'm worthy of basic respect just because I'm having a hard time." The young man nodded slowly, tears forming in his own eyes now. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I was raised better than that. I don't know why I acted like that." "I do," Marcus said. "It's easy to look down on people when you think they're different from you, when you think their struggles don't matter, when you've never had to fight for anything in your life. But everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone has a story, and the least we can do, the very least, is treat each other with dignity." The bus was coming down the street now, its headlights cutting through the rain. Marcus could see it approaching, and he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that this confrontation was ending. Sadness that it had to happen at all. "I want to do something," the guy in the cap said suddenly, "to make this right. Can I give you money for—" "I don't want your money," Marcus interrupted. "That's not what this is about." "Then what can I do?" the young man asked, and Marcus could hear the genuine desperation in his voice, the desire to fix what he'd broken, to take back what he'd said. Marcus thought for a moment as the bus pulled up to the stop. The doors hissed open, but he didn't board yet. "You want to do something?" Marcus asked. "Then do better. Be better. The next time you see someone struggling, don't assume you know their story. Don't assume they're less than you. Help if you can, and if you can't help, at least don't make it worse." He paused, looking at all three of them. "And maybe volunteer somewhere. The VA, a homeless shelter, anywhere that serves veterans. See what it's really like for the people who served. See what we're dealing with. Because there are thousands of guys like me out there, trying to make it, and we don't need judgment. We need support." The guy in the cap pulled out his wallet and took out a business card. "This is my information," he said, handing it to Marcus. "My family owns a construction company. If you're looking for work, call me. Please, I mean it." Marcus looked at the card, then at the young man's face. He saw sincerity there now. Real sincerity. He pocketed the card. "Thank you," he said simply. The older woman who'd spoken earlier stepped forward again. "I work at the community center on 5th Street, she said. "We have a support group for veterans every Thursday night. Good people, good conversation, free coffee." She smiled. "You'd be welcome." Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope, connection, the reminder that not everyone was quick to judge, that there were still good people in the world. "I'll think about it," he said, and he meant it. The bus driver called out, "You getting on or what?" Marcus nodded and started to board, but the guy in the cap called out one more time. "Sir," Marcus turned back. "Thank you for your service and for the lesson. I won't forget this. I promise." Marcus gave him a small nod, then climbed onto the bus. As the bus pulled away from the stop, Marcus found a seat by the window and watched the group of people getting smaller in the distance. The three young men were still standing there, talking among themselves. The guy in the cap had his head in his hands. The others were gesturing, probably processing what had just happened. Marcus hoped they meant what they said, hoped they'd actually change. But he also knew that even if they didn't, something had changed for him. He'd spent so long feeling invisible, feeling dismissed, feeling like he had to hide who he was and what he'd been through. But today, in the rain, at a bus stop in Philadelphia, he'd been seen, really seen, and he'd stood up for himself, not with violence, not with anger, but with truth, with dignity, with the same courage he'd shown on the battlefield, just in a different form. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his mom with a photo of Zoe. She was holding up a drawing she'd made. For Daddy, his mom's message said. She wanted you to have this before your appointment. The drawing showed the stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small, a sun in the corner, a house, simple, beautiful, perfect. Marcus felt tears welling up again. This was why he kept going. Why he fought through the hard days and the bad nights and the VA appointments and the pain. This little girl who believed in him, who loved him unconditionally, who saw him as a hero even when he didn't feel like one. The bus rumbled through the streets, and Marcus watched Philadelphia pass by outside his window. Somewhere in this city, there were people like those three guys, quick to judge, slow to understand. But there were also people like the older woman, ready to offer help and community. There were opportunities, like the business card in his pocket. There were support groups on Thursday nights. There were still possibilities. When Marcus got home that evening, after his appointment, after the long day, he'd hug his daughter tight. He'd tell her about standing in the rain, about speaking his truth, about the medals under his jacket and what they meant. And he'd teach her what he'd learned over and over again, that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, that dignity is something you carry inside yourself, that service and sacrifice matter, even when the world seems to forget, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply keep going. One day at a time, one bus ride at a time, one moment at a time, because that's what soldiers do. They endure, they overcome, they never give up. And Marcus Hayes, standing in the rain at a Philadelphia bus stop with medals hidden under a worn jacket, was still a soldier, still fighting, still standing, and that was something no insult, no judgment, no hardship could ever take away. And sometimes the strongest armor we wear is invisible, but it's always there, protecting the heart of who we really are.